research starts with a question, but actually the questioning is not enough for your research, because it actually depends for the answer and how you can answer this question that you have actually done in your hypothesis. And we talked in the previous video about the hypothesis and how you're gonna identify each of the parts of the questions and how we're gonna give the keywords from this question. The question now is how we're gonna answer this question by a brief and accurate way. This brief and accurate way is the methodology, and the methodology is important that it is the blueprint and the evidence of your research, because it's the key and it's actually the entrance of your conclusion, because there's no conclusion without a methodology. You should give your methodology firstly and then talk about what is the procedure that you're gonna go on and what is the limitations and what's your ethical considerations and all the things. Okay, what is all the things? Okay, we're gonna explain everything right now in this video, and it's gonna be so easy for you to write any methodology ever, because the methodology is not actually as hard as you're thinking, because it all depends upon the data analysis and how you're gonna categorize everything in your research. Before starting the statement of your methodology, you should identify two identifications. First thing, the research type. What is your type of your research? If it's quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative research is actually all about the numericals, all about the numbers and how you're gonna evidence by the mathematical operations and the physical rules, and all about the percentages, ratio, everything about the numbers. So all the things identify the quantitative relations between your research and the evidence that you are gonna give it, all by the numerical evidence, because it depends on the ratios, percentages, numbers. So it's called the quantitative research. But the second type is the qualitative, and the qualitative is actually the opposite of the quantitative, because it doesn't depend on the numbers. It depends on the ethical and it depends on the logical evidence. Okay, it depends on the given that you have actually given from your literature review, and then you're gonna give the outcomes, which all about the logic. It's all about the words and sentence, everything that did not depends about the number. And you can do the both. There is a type which is called the mixed research. The mixed research combines the quantitative and the qualitative research and then combines them together to make the mixed operations. The mixed operation is gonna make the combines the logic and the math together, which gonna give you a full research. And it's preferred actually because it gives the two sides of your research, of the numbers and of the logic, so it's gonna give more evidence for your research. The second thing is your research design. How are you gonna design your research, and what is your experiment survey, the case of study, and what is the field works. All the things are so important for your design, because it's gonna show how is your research is and what is the environment that involved in your research. So it's gonna give an evidence actually for your methodology. Identifying the research type and the research design are gonna open you the entrance of your methodology. Mentioning that in the introduction for the methodology is so important, because you're gonna involve in your details after that. Population and samples. Population and samples are so important because not all researchers are actually involved within them, because some researchers depends on the recent populations and the samples that actually the recent researchers that have taken in your literature review. So they don't depend on the new samples and the new population. They depends on the categorization of the thing. But I say that there's no research without any samples or population. Okay, even you are taking everything from the literature review, you're gonna take your samples and population at a field of study. If you have actually taken the teenagers' symptoms or teenager characterizations, so you're gonna take everything again and get it that this is a sample for your study. You study the teenagers, how the teenagers were, how the teenage brain works, how they are actioning everything, and what is the feeling for them and how they feel. So everything about the teenagers and actually the information about the sample. So it's a sample for your research. So talk about the teenagers as, for example, I'm talking about the teenager for examples. So that thing is the sample and population that you have working on in your research. After the population, talk about how do you collect your data, the data collection tools, which is about the questionnaire, interviewing, survey, and the experiments, all that types of data tools. They have a huge variety because you can gather everything, not just about the research papers. No, go on and search about the real land life, which is questionnaire, interviewing, asking a specialist in this field, that also will help you actually to identify and to personalize your methodology for your research. After mentioning the data tools, you are gonna mention what is the procedures for your research. We're gonna talk about the procedures and how the methodology know. We're gonna identify how do you make these procedures first, then identify the procedures step by step detailing. And here are 3 things that you should do in your methodology to give it an accuracy and to identify actually a real methodology in your research, not actually anything that you have write it as an anonymously in your research. No, you're gonna make it more accuracy and more evidence, so it's giving the mass of your research. First, data analysis. Data analysis is so important because actually it's a whole science, how to detail your data, how to analyze it, how to characterize everything in your research. So it's a whole science, but actually you can take a pre for this. And personally, I use this method, which is personalized type of procedures. Okay, so I'm gonna mention firstly the type of this research. Then I'm gonna mention the information, the most important information for the methodology, and then mention what is the designing and the environment that excluded in this research. Then what is the occupied equipments and what is the occupied population samples. After that, I'm gonna mention how would I use all that things in the procedures. Then after that, I'm gonna mention the accuracy and the percentage of its evidency, and if I have actually make it in the real life or not, and what is the literature review that actually evidence my methodology. Then all that things depends on how you're gonna personalize your research methodology, because when you personalize that, it's gonna make you a more confident for your methodology type and your research type, because no one knows your research more than you. Besides the data analysis, you're gonna take care of the ethical concentration, taking care of what is the accuracy and the consistency, the confidently of your research, is the rate of honesty in your research. When you're gonna mention that in your research, it's actually personally I think that it's gonna give you more evidence. Your actual research and actually evidence it, but mentioning its accuracy is gonna increase your research evidence. And the last thing that you're gonna concentrate very, very well in your research methodology, which is the limitation. Talking about how would it make so accurate in this part, and if it's accurate by this visualize it, and in the chemistry it's not evidence it, and in the physics, so we can make that, we can combine that, we can make the mathematical operation, so it's gonna make it more accuracy. So mentioning all that things in your methodology is actually gonna make you very, very, very big mass for your research, because it's gonna give you a critical thinking. The research, it's mass on the how much the critical thinking in this research. So what more critical thinking in your research, way more mass for your research. And the last thing for your research, which is the conclusion. Conclusion is so important, because okay, what we are going to give after all that procedures, we're gonna give the conclusion. But how we would rewrite the conclusion is that the art of writing the conclusion is actually depending on 2 main procedures: summarizing and observation. Summarizing is just like talking about what is the last thing that you have actually evidenced in your methodology, because most of readers are actually not gonna read all the procedures, they are gonna read the conclusion of your research. So the conclusion of the methodology should be just evidencing everything that you have said in your methodology. Okay? The last thing that we have reached is that the caffeine is so harmful for teenagers. For example, I'm saying a very easy thing, but I'm gonna say for example to make it easy for you. Second thing, the observation. How would this methodology survey the researchers or the literature review, the other researchers? So keep concerned about how to write your conclusion and how to make it more summarized and observation, more evidence in it, because that provide your research more accuracy and actually making it more high masses. So important for you to keep an eye. And now we're gonna show you an example, and actually the briefly highlights an ad before here, so you can get everything in it and you can highlight things in your paper. So let's go. And then right now we're gonna take a sample for the quantitative methodology. This researcher has written this research. It's about environmental conditions. So this methodology is actually categorized and highlighted by each part this researcher has written in the methodology. So the first thing is that the study site provides the relevant and detailed information regarding the environmental conditions and the experiments. Then after that, he provide the site sources behind everything that you can see here. He said for the reminder of the year as the MC Dowell and the Estrella Brento 1988. So he has mentioned the reference behind the information. So this is the way we could mention the literature review on the actual methodology. After that, he is gonna make the acknowledge limitation. I have previously talking about the limitation and how it's gonna make you an evidence for your methodology. So he has mentioned the limitation for the chosen approach while also showing this choice is appropriate of the methodology resource. So I provide the sufficient detail, including the measurements possible or not, and the reader could replicate the experiment. So I could make it more evidence, and actually it would be so accuracy more than anyway, and more than actually being not existing in this methodology as the limitation, as I have mentioned recently, that this is so important for increasing your accuracy in your research. So after that, he has mentioned that description for the preparation of the samples. Okay, we're talking about the third stage, which is the samples and the population. So here are the samples. So he has making analysis for the samples, and he has actually making the provided sufficient details of the limitation, and then the size with the information regarding the conditions. He actually making the research design first, then he had actually making the research type as a quantitative here, and then we are in the third stage, which is the descriptive of the samples or the population according to the type of this research. And then the population tools. Okay, we're gonna take the population tools after that as the also the design for this research. So the tools is so important to be mentioned, as I have said previously. So after that, he had got this mathematical formulas, because I have talked previously, okay, that it's a quantitative research. So it depends on the mathematical formulations and operations, and actually we can combine the physics and the chemistry in it. So here is depend on the mathematical operation. After that, we could find that it provides the references for the peer researches and the methodology, establishes practices, and even makes clear improvement on these conventions. So he actually has got a lot of references here and make it as a full methodology. We have here can say that the describes the statistical test. Okay, after that, the end of the thing, we are making the limitations. So the test is from the limitations that practice the accuracy and the honesty of this research. We can here find actually that he got the conclusion of this research in the last of this methodology, and then gathering it in so briefly way that could get all the things that he actually had from this whole methodology. So it's so good, and actually getting it's getting the statement accurate. So that means that it is a beneficial methodology. So we can benefit from it. We can take it as a preference, and yeah, it's a successful methodology. And another sample, which is a qualitative methodology. The qualitative methodology here, we're gonna make a connection between the question that we have previously asked in the hypothesis, and then we have to answer it right now in the methodology. So we're gonna firstly make the connection between the research question and the methodology, and how we're gonna make it. As we can say that this methodology is talking about the Twitter, and it's imagine their audience. So specify the criteria for the data sample, and then provide the sufficient detail for the reader, to replicate the study. He is gonna make everything about the research design, and after that he provides the rationale for the research decisions. So everything right now is so detailed. And the last thing is the acknowledge discard of the obstacles of the during the research. We could find here that he provides the references, and he provides all the knowledge and all the giving the outcomes in the last two sentence, which is that the future important work might examine the prevalence of the strategies for their relationship to follower counts, demographics, and generic content. Okay, so he is ending this with the conclusion. So ending with a conclusion means that this methodology is successful. So that was two samples of the methodology. I hope that was beneficial for you, and you could take that as a helpful method for your methodology. And that was our video for today. I hope it was helpful.